Okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and look. We are on the bottom of the second page, bottom of the back page. So what we're going to look at today, we are going to look at factoring a GCF out first, and then doing it just like we did yesterday. So as I look at number 10, whenever you factor, listen up, whenever you factor, you have to take a GCF out first. Always check for a GCF, and we'll talk more about that next week. Yes? Just a second. So as I look at this number 10, I have 20, 52, and 24, and I need to find the GCF. So first thing you need to look for, look at the smallest number. Does 20 go into all three of them? No. So 20 is not the GCF. So then start checking. They're all even. 20, 24, and 52 and all are all even. So what do I know is the number that probably goes into them? Try 2. I know 2 will go into them. 4. Let's try some bigger numbers and see. 4 goes into 20. 4 goes into 24. Let's see if 4 goes into 52. It goes in there 13 times. Okay? As I keep looking, we want to see if anything else bigger goes into 20, 52, and 24. So is there anything bigger than 4 that goes into 20, 52, and 24? No. So 4 is your GCF. And I cannot pull an in out because that 24 does not have an in. So I'm just going to pull 4 out. So like we've done with GCS first, a mistake I noticed a lot is you have to pull the GCF out first, write what is left, and then factor it again from there. So if I pull out the 4, we have to write what is left. Do not forget to write what is left when I divide out that 4, bring out the 4. 4 times what gives me 20n squared? 5n squared. This is all review. We've done it before. 4 times what gives me negative 52? Negative 13. If you don't know, you can divide negative 52 divided by 4, so negative 13n. And then 4 times what gives me negative 24? Negative 6. You cannot forget that step. You have to divide out the 4, put what is left, and then we can factor it again. So now as I look at this, I notice in my parenthesis, I need to see if I can factor it again. So in my parenthesis, I have a trinomial. Okay? It's a trinomial with a number in front. I have a 5 in front. So since there is a 5 in front, I cannot start with 2 parentheses like this with variables in front. So if there was just an n squared without the 5, then I could do it this way. Since there's a 5 in front, we have to do it the long way like we did yesterday. We are going to ignore this 4. We'll put the GCF always at the end in front, but we're going to factor this part in the parentheses. Okay? So we have to go through the steps like we did yesterday. First times the last. 5 times negative 6. Negative 30. So 5 times negative 6. Negative 30. Okay? Some of you guys asked yesterday, do I need to show all the steps? You do not. This is actually step 2. You do not have to show all these steps, but in your notes, I want them to be there so you see what I'm actually doing. So 5, you take the first times the last, 5 times negative 6, negative 30. Third step, I need to find 2 numbers that multiply to give me the number I just found, negative 30, and add to give me negative 13, the middle number. Don't forget your negative in front. Okay? Now, as you're thinking, they have to multiply to give me a negative. So 1 has to be negative, 1 has to be positive. If they add to give me a negative number, the bigger number has to be negative. So what are some numbers that multiply to give me negative 13, or negative 30, and add to give me negative 13? Daniel had it. What was it? Negative 15 and 2. So those 2 numbers, like we had done some last week, are negative 15 and 2. They multiply to give you negative 30. They add to give you negative 13. Once you find those 2 numbers, anybody remember what I do with them? Replace them for the middle. So I write 5n squared. We ignore the 4 till the end. So I write my 5n squared, and I replace negative 13n with negative 15n plus 2n, and then I write my minus 6. So you write the exact same polynomial, except the middle term you replace with negative 15 and 2, and don't forget the n. It makes sense. Negative 15n plus 2n is the same as negative 13n. Now, I have 4 terms, so how do I always factor something with 4 terms? 2 and 2, grouping. Group the first 2, group the second 2. If you want to use parentheses, I don't care. Group the first 2, group the second 2. What's the GCF of 5n squared minus 15n? 5n. And then you have to see what's left. 5n times what gives me 5n squared? N. Or you can think about, I took out the 5, I took out one of the n's, so there's an n left. 5 times what gives me negative 15n?
3.
Negative 3. And then we look at my second 2, 2n minus 6. Factor out positive 2. I'm going to factor out a positive 2. 2 times what gives me 2n? N. 2 times what gives me negative 6? Negative 3. Now, like I've said before, when you factor by grouping, your parentheses should end up being the same. If they don't, you didn't factor the GCF out. It's probably what you did wrong. This is not my final answer, because factored cannot be adding. There's a big plus in the middle. Factor has to be something times something. Final answer?
5n plus 3.
5n plus 2. Take what? The numbers that are outside, add them, and then n minus 3. And the 4 in the front. Don't forget, I took the GCF out at the very beginning. I did. And you need to take that. You got my back. I'm so lucky to have you in this class, yes. Okay. Now, this is factored because this is 4 times 5n plus 2 times n minus 3. You could always FOIL and distribute the 4, and you'll get back the original answer.
Are you doing another one?
Yeah. We'll see. Okay. Any questions on that? Okay, we are going to look at 14. Let's look at 14. Okay, so you have to always look for a GCF. Anytime you factor, you have to look for a GCF first. 32, 16, and 2. 2. Check the smallest number. 2 goes into all of them. I do not bring an x out because they all do not have x's. So I bring a 2 out front. You have to put what is left. So if I go through and divide by 2 or take out a 2, you have to put what is left before you try to factor it again.
Okay.
2 times what gives me 32?
16x squared.
16x squared. So 2 times 16. I didn't mess with the x's, so it's still x squared. 2 times what gives me negative 16? Negative 8x. Now don't forget this one. 2 times what gives me 2? You have to put the 1 there. Now, we have the 2 out front. We're going to ignore it till the end. Don't forget. Only stupid people forget to put it out there.
Me?
No, me. Okay, so take the 2 out front. We'll put it at the end in front. Now, as I look in the parentheses, I have a trinomial. Can I factor it with 2 parentheses and put x's in front? Can I start? No, why not? The 16 is front. You cannot do this shortcut unless x squared is alone. It is not. There's a 16 in front. So you have to, that tells you have to do it the long way like we did yesterday. Okay, let's start. Step 2 is where we multiply first and the last. 16 times 1? 16. Again, you don't have to show steps 2 and 3. You have to show the other steps, but if you can do that in your head, that's fine, but I'm showing it in your notes so you know where I'm getting numbers from. Step 3, I need to find 2 numbers that multiply to give me the number I just got, which is 16, and add to give you negative 8. Now, let's think about the signs. They have to multiply to get a positive, so my signs are going to be both negative or both positive, but since they have to add to get a negative, they're both going to be negative. There's no way you can have 2 positive numbers that add to give you a negative. So I'm looking for 2 negative numbers. Negative 4 and negative 4. So those 2 numbers are negative 4 and negative 4. They add to give me negative 6, or sorry, they multiply to give me 16. They add to give me negative 8. Any questions so far? So just like yesterday, but we have to take the 2 out first. Step 4. I rewrite my polynomial, the 2 we ignored till the end. I rewrite my polynomial, and what do I do with my negative 4's? Plug them in where the 8x is. Okay? Do not forget, since I'm replacing the negative 8x with negative 4 and negative 4, I have to put x's with them to make a replacement. Okay, 4 terms. How do I always factor 4 terms? 2 parentheses, group them together. Group the first 2, group the second 2, whatever. I don't care if you don't know what to call it, as long as you can do it, it's fine. Group the first 2, group the second 2 together, and we're going to look at the GCF of each one separate. So 16x squared minus 4x. 4x. We pick the lowest exponent. So we take out a 4x. 4 times what gives me 16? 4. I started with x squared. I took out one of the x's. I have a what? X to the first. 4x times what gives me negative 4x? Negative 1. Now look at your second 2. This one's kind of tricky. I look at my second 2. It's close to being the same, except what do you notice is off?
X squared.
Look at your second. The negative 4 is negative 4x plus 1 instead of a positive 4x minus 1. So yeah, so I take out a negative 1 because taking out that negative 1 will basically switch the sign. So negative 1 times what gives me negative 4x? Positive 4x. Negative 1 times what gives me a negative 1? Or positive 1? Negative 1. So if you notice your signs are different, it's the same stuff but just opposite signs. Take out a negative 1. Because that will switch the sign. Now my parentheses are the same. Final answer? 4x minus 1. What's on the outside? 4x minus 1.
4x minus 2.
Okay.
4x minus.
Okay, yeah. So what's on the outside? 4x minus 1. What's on the inside? 4x minus 1. I have the 2 in front.
Can you put 2 parentheses 4x minus 1 squared?
You could put, either answer would be fine. Since you are multiplying 4x minus 1 times itself, that is the same as squaring. If you wouldn't do the squaring thing, I wouldn't count off. But since you're multiplying by itself, it's 4x minus 1 squared. Okay. Any questions on those? Okay. So what the rest of the block will look like. Okay. So the homework from yesterday, you can now finish that. So yesterday I said just get 1 through 9 done. You can finish that. Now, I know I'm giving you a lot of time for not a lot of problems. However, these problems take a while, and I want you guys to be able to ask questions because these get tricky because there's lots of steps. So, I don't care if you listen to music, but I want you guys working on these because I want to be able to help you if you get stuck because these tend to be tricky. Okay? So I know you have a lot of time, but I want you to use your time and get this done and ask if you don't understand because I want to be able to help you. If we're not going to be using our time, we're going to be sitting there not working on the computer, not doing this, then I'm just going to cut it and you can do it at home and sorry if you don't get it. But use your time to ask.